now some breaking news to bring you now. GB News can now confirm that 33,000 small boat migrants have crossed the Channel this year alone. And joining us now is our Homeland Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. It never rains, but it pours for Sir Keir Starmer. Yesterday, a brief moment of celebration with the arrest of that Turkish man, a Mr. Big. And now back to business as normal. The boats keep pouring in. Tell us more.
And didn't we always know that this was going to be the pattern for what we would see in the weeks and months ahead? That grim milestone of 33,000 small boat migrants so far this year was reached just a short time ago, as our Kent producer confirmed to us that a second small boat crossed the English Channel into English waters today, carrying more than 100 people between those two boats. And that takes us now over 33,000 for the year. That is 3,500 more than the numbers who crossed in the whole of last year. And we still got, about a month and a half before the end of the year. Okay, the weather conditions are likely to be a bit more poor in the Channel on more days than not in the coming weeks, but there will still be enough days for that number to tick up by a few thousand more, I have no doubt, before the end of the year. And as you pointed out in your introduction there, Martin, just this time yesterday, we were reporting on the fact that the Prime Minister was hailing the arrest of a small boat supplier, a significant figure, according to Sir Keir Starmer. But what this goes to show you today is that one supplier is only one part of this huge illegal endeavour. There are many suppliers out there that these organised criminal people smugglers can go to for their small boats, engines and other equipment.
And Mark White, as you've been saying for months, if not years, if you get rid of one drug dealer, they're replaced by another drug dealer. It's exactly the same in this evil trade. And another piece of bad news yesterday, hot on the heels of Sir Keir Starmer's good news, an astonishing sight, Mark, of 98 illegal immigrants aboard one craft, which I believe is a grim new record.
Yeah, it's a record in terms of boats that have made it to UK waters carrying that many people on a single vessel. It's not uncommon, sadly, for boats to be launched from the beaches of northern France carrying more than 100 migrants. But what often happens is they are so vastly overloaded and weighed down, they can't make any headway. They get into serious difficulties. The French, who are escorting these vessels, move in. They take a few dozen people, usually from the boat, and then the remainder on the boat, 50 or so, decide that they're going to stay and continue on their journey to the UK. It happens day in, day out. This was one where the French, if they did intervene, no one was taken off, and all 98 of these migrants made it to UK waters.
Well, once again, Mark White, we saw they were escorted into British waters by a French craft, and then they were picked up by the RNLI and taxied ashore. And Mark White, people are really pulling their hair out about this now. Smash the gangs, a big arrest, a ticker-take moment. Here we go. We're having a breakthrough. We've turned a corner. Mark, nothing is changing, is it? In fact, as you just pointed out, things seem to be getting worse.
Yeah, there's been no slowdown whatsoever in the numbers crossing the English Channel since Labour came to power, vowing to smash the gangs. In fact, as we just pointed out before, we are ahead by 3,500 on where we were for the whole of last year, and we'll be significantly up on that by the end of the year. Any endeavour to try to dismantle the criminal gangs is for the longer term. It's going to take a very long time indeed to be able to make any inroads. And even then, whether they actually dismantle all of the gangs is a moot point at the moment. We just don't know how this law enforcement effort will go. And all the while, they keep coming across, and the numbers have to be accommodated somewhere. And we're hearing more and more stories coming through of these hotels that the Labour government told us they were going to end the use of, being requisitioned again by this government to put in migrants and deny the facility of that hotel to a local community.
Using the internet without a VPN is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. We want to help protect you. This video's sponsor, Private Internet Access, is the VPN to help keep you safe. Now, you might be asking, what is a VPN? Well, a virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Whenever you connect to the internet on a public Wi-Fi network, such as at airports, coffee shops, friends' houses, or even in your own home, your data is at risk of being stolen. Hackers that are connected to the same Wi-Fi network have the ability to steal your personal data with ease. T-Mobile reached a settlement this year with the US Federal Communications Commission after they suffered data breaches in 2021, 22, and 23. In 2023 alone, over 37 million customers' data was exposed. And it's not just hackers to be concerned about. Information can be censored. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news content that you love. Private Internet Access is available for all platforms: Windows, macOS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one Private Internet Access subscription to protect an unlimited number of devices at the same time. Plus, we've got a huge GBNews discount. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get 83% off PIA. That is under £2 a month, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. So head to piavpn.com/GBNews to start protecting yourself digitally today.
And Mark White, if I may ask you on an affiliated topic, if I can, while we're waiting for our next guest, I'm about to report on the fact there is a secret meeting today in Brussels about, once again, putting freedom of movement for the under-30s back on the table. We hear this is now being treated as a red line by Brussels, something they're going to be adamant upon if there is to be any form of new trade or arrangement deal. And they're ramping up the fear off the back of Donald Trump and the imposition possibly of tariffs. Time and time again, Mark White's Keir Starmer said, no, we won't do that. But it seems to continually keep coming up. Mark White, do you think this is something that could potentially come back to haunt us here in Britain?
Well, we may be arguing over the final points like we were very much with some of the tax rises we saw in the last budget there, with the government saying that no, there is no freedom of movement, but yes, there is freedom of movement for the young. And the problem is, and the concern would be, that even a freedom of movement arrangement for the young under 30s, and that's not that young, it's a very significant potential number of people that it could then start moving back to the UK, because you'll remember, of course, before Brexit, there were many people in that age group who were coming to the UK to work in the likes of the hospitality industry. So we could see a similar flow of migrants under 30 coming again if Sir Keir Starmer decides that he will agree with the European Union's red line on negotiations here and agree to that freedom of movement for those under the age of 30.
Mark, right, I think you're exactly right. In fact, I've been through the numbers, I've crunched the numbers. I'm going to review those on the show in a short while. That red line really should set a red alarm bell ringing for Brits. Thank you, Mark White, for joining us on the show. Always an absolute pleasure. And as I've just been saying in Brussels today, EU bureaucrats are planning a bombshell demand for youth mobility as a red line in any deal between the UK and the European Union, and that could open Britain to millions of under-30s. Are we back once again on the road to rejoining the European Union? Well, GBNews political correspondent Catherine Forster spoke to Rachel Reeves about this very topic earlier on today.
And wanting a closer relationship with the European Union in that speech, something that the Governor of the Bank of England talked about as well, in that it had hampered growth, Brexit had hampered growth. How's that going to work? And can you reassure GB News viewers, many of whom voted for Brexit, that Brexit is safe with this government?
However you voted in the referendum, it's undeniable that it is harder for businesses today to trade with our nearest neighbours and trading partners in the European Union. Doesn't mean that we should go back into the EU or the single market or customs union, but we do need a reset of that relationship because it's in our British national interest to improve trade flows and make it easier for great British businesses to sell into European markets. And that's why next month I'll be attending the Eurogroup finance ministers meeting to make that case in Brussels for free and open trade.
So, youth mobility scheme, is it freedom of movement dressed up in a different name? Well, joining me now in the studio, I'm delighted to say, is the Chief Executive Officer from European Movements UK, Cynic Harvey. Cynic, welcome to the studio. Pleasure to have your company. So, here we are again. No freedom of movement will return after Brexit. We've been told endlessly. A meeting is happening in Brussels today, and the European Commission, they're saying they're adamant. Youth mobility schemes for under-30s in EU is what they say, quotes, a red line and a key demand in any discussion with Britain with increased integration. And Keir Starmer certainly does want increased integration. Is a youth mobility scheme a price worth paying?
Well, a youth mobility scheme would be hugely in our interests. It would certainly be in the interests of young British people who would start being able to go for a limited period of time and work and study and travel in European countries again. It would be a huge advantage to the British economy to allow this again because we have chronic shortages of labour in certain key sectors, particularly hospitality, which young Europeans would readily come in and do for a while before they went back home to resume their lives elsewhere. So I hope very much that it's something that will happen. I think, in fairness, the Europeans have been signalling for months and months and months that this is something they want to talk about. They've yet to make a proposal, so I'm glad to hear they're having a meeting today to try and define a little more precisely what they want to propose. The government hasn't looked very interested in discussing it so far, but they can't really judge that until there's a proposal on the table for them to have a look at.
OK, I've got a couple of graphics I want to pop up on the screen now. Let's get the first one up for us to have a look at, if we can. So this is the Erasmus scheme, as it used to be called. This is the student exchange scheme. You can see there that 99.6% of UK students never used Erasmus. It was a tiny percentile of British students used it. In fact, at its peak, it was only around about 9,900 British students went to the European Union. Look at our next graphic. This is just Erasmus alone. This is a tiny percentile of all under 30s. As you can see, that's pretty much one-way traffic. That's in 1 year. Over 3 times the amount of European Union students came here to the UK, and that's just students. When you look at the numbers of under 30s that came to the UK between 2016 and 2019, it was getting on for 900,000 under 30s came to Britain. Every single year, it was over 200,000. In some, it was 250,000. And there's every reason to believe that if a new scheme came in, it would be bigger than that, because it'd be boom time. There'd be a rush to get into the UK. That would suppress wages for the working classes. It would cut down on jobs in hospitality. It would cut down on jobs on building sites. It would certainly up the cost of university for the white working classes in Britain, who are the least likely to attend university, because they'd be priced out in the market by all of these foreign students. Great if you're a big business owner and you want cheap labour. Great if you're a university owner, but if you're a Brit, you're going to get stuffed by such a deal.
Well, you're certainly not. I think we need to take some of those things one at a time. I mean, between 2016 and 2019, we had complete freedom of movement. Anybody who wanted to could come here and work, and anyone who wanted to go to Europe could go there and work or study or
But it was one-way traffic on the whole. Far more people came here than went to the...
The population of Europe is bigger than the population of the UK.
Precisely.
So obviously that's going to be the number flow. I'm saying to you, we want these people to come here. Our economy desperately needs them. We're desperate to try and get overseas students into our universities.
But the electorate don't agree with you on that.
Well, I'm not so sure you're right about that. During the course of the election, we commissioned questions to go on to polls, and we asked the public, would you favour a reciprocal right of this sort? And we found that it was supported not only by the population as a whole, it was supported by people who had voted Leave, it was supported by people who were voting for reform, it was supported by people voting Conservative, it was supported in the Red Wall. British youngsters have had rights that were theirs taken away from them, and this is the way to get them back. And this is not freedom of movement. Well, freedom of movement is complete freedom to come and go as you please. This is something that is time limited. It has a visa. It has conditions. It's not freedom of movement. I wish it were, because that would be a thoroughly good thing. But this is a pale limitation.
You speak in semantics. You speak in semantics.
I'm not. It's fundamentally different.
Freedom of youth mobility is freedom of movement for the 18 to 30s. It's freedom of movement for a smaller percentile. Except here's the rub. If you look at the numbers, the 18 to 30s make up around about 45 to 50% of anybody who came into the European Union before Brexit. Because guess what? Young people are more mobile, more ambitious, and want to go away. And so what I'm saying is it will be 50% of where we were before, and probably more, because it'll be seen as, wow, the gates are open, let's get in sharpish. It will be a disaster for population control in this country. It'll be a disaster for the working classes, and it will price the working classes out of British universities. Facts.
No, the British universities are on their knees because they haven't had enough applications this year from British students. They're desperate for overseas students to fill some of that gap.
They pay 50% more than Brits. Of course they're desperate to get foreign students in. They're treating foreign students like cash cows, but they're taking places that Brits can't afford to compete with. The richest Europeans come and price the Brits out.
But there aren't enough British people applying to go. This is the problem. We have sectors in this country, particularly hospitality, but there are care, there is transport, logistics, there are hospitals, desperate for labour. Why? Because like the whole of the rest of the developed world...
for cheap labour.
No,
they want cheap labour. How about paying a decent wage to a Brit so we don't rely on immigration?
Where are all these Brits? We've got
benefits.
No, they're not.
Let's get them off benefits and get them working for Britain.
Unemployment we've ever had. We have
Millions
got a
are out of work.
labour shortage, the same as the whole of the developed world, because we have got too small a population of working age relative to the population as a whole. The whole of the world is competing for labour, and as you rightly say,
labour.
These youngsters
addicted to cheap labour. That's been the problem for years. Cheap minimum wage labour, in fact, often below minimum wage for a while. It was 20 percentile points below minimum wage in care homes. It was legalised slave labour. It was a disgrace.
I agree with that, but the issue of where the labour comes from is not the issue there. The issue is the immorality of rogue employers. And I'm saying to you, young, fit, healthy Europeans who come and go are an absolutely ideal labour source, which if we'd got the slightest wit about us, we would be competing vigorously to get our hands on. And this is a thoroughly good and positive development. And in return, young Brits can go and work and study in Europe, which is a right they have had taken away from them.
By the electorate, democratically. And that's the issue.
They didn't get to vote themselves. Older people decided that they wanted to stop this, and this is something which, I'm telling you again, our opinion polling shows the public as a whole, including those hard-to-please groups that I mentioned, all approve of if it is on a reciprocal basis. We need this, and if we're going to repair the relationship with Europe, which, let's face it, is in a mess, it's an economic mess.
Exports have increased since Brexit. You know, our economy is
costing us £115 billion a year, not to be in the single market. If we can repair some of that relationship, then we haven't saved anything.
Look, we ran out of time being told we've got to move on. I could talk about Brexit all day.
An arm and a leg.
In fact, I absolutely miss it. Thank you very much, Sir Nick Harvey, Chief Executive Officer from European Movement UK. Thank you very much.